Here are 5 strategies to delegate more faster. I've got a 5-part system for you here. It spells DATB, D-A-T-T-B. Before we jump into that, I have 2 assumptions that need to be true for this system to work. Let's see if you've got these. 1, I'm going to assume that the task that you're hoping to delegate is a good task. If you're looking to delegate something that is too difficult, too complicated, too high level, obviously that's not going to work. Secondly, I'm going to assume the person you're delegating to is the appropriate person to be doing the task. I'm going to speak largely about delegating to executive assistants. That is one of my specialties. I've hired over 800 executive assistants for entrepreneurs, and I myself have had my own EA for over a decade. So I've learned a ton along the way, and that's my context. The first of our 5 strategies, the letter D, is DMGs, or decision-making guidelines. A decision-making guideline, or DMG, is a guideline you can give your assistant that helps them to make a decision. So a really classic example comes from the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, where the author Tim Ferriss would tell his assistant that if a problem could be solved for less than $50, then just solve it. Don't stop, don't ask him for approval, just solve it, spend the $50, and they can review at the end of the week if there are any particularly troubling kind of issues that came from that. A DMG could also be something like when booking a hotel room, you could say, I need to be within 10 minutes of the conference venue. If it's going to be an Airbnb, I need the whole home, not just a room. I don't need a fitness center, but I do need a microwave. So you can see how these are all guidelines that you can give. As soon as you can find the right collection of DMGs, a lot of tasks actually become delegatable. Our second strategy is access. Sometimes all an assistant needs is some access. That could be a username and a password, or it could be a key to a room, a code to a door, or it could also be permissions. So sometimes inside of a tech tool, there'll be different levels of permissions. So for example, inside of online banking, you could give your assistant access. However, you can limit what their permissions are to say they can't add or edit users to your bank account. The assistant cannot send money transfers, whether it's wires, ACH, or otherwise. They can't transfer money between certain bank accounts, but they can see balances, download bank statements, the kinds of things that you would need your assistant to do to help your bookkeeper to prepare the books and ultimately taxes. There's also different levels of permissions typically inside of CRMs and other tech tools, like in WordPress, like in HubSpot, or Infusionsoft or ActiveCampaign. There's all these different tools where you can really manipulate and adjust the permissions inside of that tool. And sometimes just the right access with the right level of permissions can unlock an assistant to help you big time. The third of 5 strategies is T for training. I find this is oftentimes the biggest gap between an entrepreneur and an assistant. That training could come in a few different forms. It could be product knowledge, it could be tool knowledge, or it could be people knowledge. So just earlier today, I was working with a client, and that client was attempting to hand off more and more of their email inbox to their assistant. One email that came in is because the entrepreneur has an Airbnb that they rent out. And the email that came in was an inquiry from a potential renter who had a question about the property. Are there many units on this property, or just yours, was the question. Well, the assistant didn't know how to answer, so they deferred to their entrepreneur. But guess what? All it takes is for the entrepreneur to say, hey, how about I train you on what my property is, which is product knowledge, and in the future you can handle that. Now, the best of all is that the entrepreneur's Airbnb listing already had all the information on it. So all the entrepreneur had to do was turn to the assistant and say, hey, could you study my Airbnb listing? And if any further questions come out that are not listed on the Airbnb listing, just let me know and I can help answer them for you. So that would be product knowledge. Tool knowledge would be knowing how to use a tool. Sometimes tool knowledge has to be created by the entrepreneur to give to the assistant. Sometimes though, there can be training that's just like on the manufacturer's website. So for example, HubSpot has a lot of training on the HubSpot website. QuickBooks has a lot of training on the QuickBooks website. And even if there's not manufacturer training, there is oftentimes different YouTube videos. If you just search for how to use QuickBooks or beginner's tutorial to QuickBooks or WordPress or whatever the case may be. So that's tool knowledge. The third is people knowledge. As emails come in, as requests come in, oftentimes it's really helpful for the entrepreneur to train the assistant on who these people are. Is this person a VIP who should be on my calendar, or should we be routing this person to someone else? Who are personally important people? What's the name of the aunt, the uncle, the mom, the dad, the brother, the sister, the romantic partner? So the assistant knows what priority to assign to different messages. So our third strategy is training. It could be product knowledge, tool knowledge, or people knowledge. The fourth strategy is tools. There are so many different tools that if an assistant just has the right tool, they can actually get the job done. The most common tool that I've used with my assistant is actually creating templates, and oftentimes spreadsheet templates. And specifically what I mean by that, for example, every time I speak, we create what's called a speaker prep form. So I created it once as a template, and then my assistant duplicates it every single time I have a speaking engagement, whether that's an in-person speaking engagement or a digital speaking engagement like a podcast or a webinar. In that template, I've defined all the information I need to be successful when I speak. So for example, that template will have what is the date and the time, the Zoom link I'm supposed to use, or the room number if it's a physical location, a description of the audience, if there's going to be tech involved like my laptop, is it my clicker, their clicker, what are the HDMI or VGA or different outputs for me to send the video signal to a screen. Do they need to see my slides ahead of time? Do I get a booth if it's a physical event? What's the dress code? All these production related questions, I put them into a single document, into a spreadsheet. I call it a speaker prep form. I gave that tool to my assistant, and my assistant was able to do that work for every single presentation that I do. And it makes my life and the host's life so much better. I also have a standard template that I created. It's the information I need every time I do a sales call. And so now my assistant and actually another team member as well, they work together to make sure I'm fully prepared for every time I step into a sales meeting. In more recent years, the last couple of years here, ChatGPT's become a big thing. Just giving your assistant an account to ChatGPT is already a game changer, but then giving them some prompts to use is the next level up. And then the next level up beyond that would be a custom GPT. So let's say you want to help your assistant know how you make decisions around booking hotel rooms. Well, if that's the case, then you could create a custom GPT called Tim's Hotel Preferences or Tim's Accommodations. And in there you can say all your different preferences into the custom GPT, such as, I don't care if there's a fitness center, but there must be reliable high-speed Wi-Fi. If it's going to be an Airbnb, then I need the whole home, not just a room. I need to be within a 10-minute walk of the conference center. I don't want to spend anything more than $150 to $250 per night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a sense, you can see how I'm taking my DMGs, which was our very first strategy. I'm taking it though and putting those DMGs into a custom GPT. And so now it's almost like my assistant gets to talk to me because it's talking to a custom GPT that I trained. So you can see how that becomes a really powerful tool. One other tool example, let's say you want your assistant to edit your YouTube videos or podcast interviews to remove the ums, the ers, the ahs. Well, there are tools out there that will do that pretty much automatically. For example, Descript is a tool that's available. You could get your assistant an account for that. All your assistant has to do now is download the podcast or video episode, put it in, pretty much automatically removes ums, ers, and ands, and leaves with a much cleaner episode. That used to take hours for an assistant to do, but now your assistant could do it in probably under about 10 minutes using a great tool like Descript. If you have the right DMGs, the right access, the right training, the right tools, it could be the only thing remaining, which is our fifth tool, is your beliefs. We surveyed 149 entrepreneurs and asked them what their single biggest fear or frustration was with getting an assistant. And far and away, the number one fear and frustration was, I don't know how to let go of control. I don't know how to trust an assistant. So this is kind of an example of how beliefs can actually get in the way. So the solution here is to actually ask a very simple question that might have a really rich answer. And that question is, What would have to be true for me to delegate this to my assistant? So it's not saying, can I delegate or not? We're going to assume that it can. Then we're going to ask this question, what would have to be true for me to delegate this to my assistant safely, comfortably, or comfortable enough? You might find that, let's say it's a legally sensitive task or email, asking that question, what would have to be true? You would figure out, you know what, actually, if my assistant just had signed an NDA and had the correct permissions, yeah, you know what, I could get comfortable enough to hand this off to my assistant. Maybe it's a high leverage task, like sending an email broadcast to 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 people. And that makes you a little bit nervous. You're like, I don't believe my assistant can actually get this right, because if they don't, it's going to be really difficult and embarrassing. Okay, well, let's ask the question, what would have to be true for you to confidently delegate this to your assistant? Well, maybe an answer you have there is that you would double check their work before it gets released. So maybe your assistant doesn't hit the final go button, but your assistant is the one who sets it all up, and then you get on a Zoom call, you review their work. Once you've double checked it and give it the thumbs up, now they can hit send to send out that email to 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 people. So the 5 strategies are DMGs, access, training, tools, and beliefs. Now I'm going to give you one last way to use this 5-part and 5-step system. And specifically, that is to use it actually as a design or diagnosis tool. So if you're sitting there in your email inbox and you're like, man, I just don't know how I would delegate this email, then just run that email through these 5 strategies. What DMGs does your assistant need to handle this email? What access would they need to what tools with what permissions? What training would you need to give your assistant on product, tool, and people? What tools would they need? Are there templates, custom GPTs, or other tools? And then ultimately look at what beliefs have me thinking twice or hesitating, and how can I solve for that, right? These 5 strategies will help you delegate more faster. Subscribe for more great information like this, and I will see you in the next one.